So we're learning the Maimer Zohar as Hashosel Cha'amolek from the Maimorim Mulukotim of the previous Rebbe, Volume 1, page 140. And we're at towards the bottom of the page, of that page. The Ibud, it's the last word on the third line from the bottom. And just to briefly recap, the Rebbe says that the verse implies that Amalek, its worst, is the worst enemy, and it's such an enemy that it attacks you on your derech. So the Rebbe wants to explore, because it attacked us on our way out. Derech means way, on our way out of Mitzrayim. So the Rebbe wants to explore that, and also that the remedy to that is Zohar, the opening of the Maimer, the first word in that verse. Remember, Zohar. Somehow, through memory, will be able to destroy this Amalek. This is basically the way he sets up the Maimer, and it's always important, Avram and Yoni, it's important that when you learn a Maimer Chassidus to know the setup, because if you don't, you can get confused and have questions. For example, the basic question that everyone asks when they learn Chabad Chassidus, especially Maimorim, not so much Tanya, is, okay, you have questions, where's my answer? If you look into Sfas Emes and Kedushas Levi and all the Polish Nesiva Shalom, all those Svarim, right? They give you a question and answer, with a little commentary and explanation. In Chabad Maimorim, it's totally different. There are questions at the beginning, and there are no answers for pages, usually. And if there are answers, it's like maybe this, maybe that. This thought will clarify this. It's like intricate and complicated. And only at the end of the Maimer, after you have a clear picture of the body of the Maimer, do you have a resolve for the questions. And what this tells us is, and I've said this before, but it's very important. I'm not sure, Avram, if you heard, because I say this. And this is that Chabad Chassidus and its Maimer form is not about a question and an answer.
Hold on a second.
It's not about a question and an answer. If you want a question and an answer, you got the wrong Chassidus study. Here, the whole idea is to study divinity, godliness in Hebrew, Elokus or Elokut. That's the thrust of the Maimer, a godly concept that a Lubavitcher Rebbe at a certain time revealed to the world. Yoni, can you tell Hillel? Okay, he took off his thing. So, Hillel, please mute yourself. Hillel. So, that's the idea of a Maimer. So the questions and answers become insignificant. For our learning and the style that we use, I try to incorporate the two together, so that, for our way of thinking, there's a question, a discussion, and then an answer. But the truth of the matter is, if you learn a Maimer on Shabbos, let's say you go to Rabbi Faro or some other Chabadnik who gives a shir in Likutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe, it can go on for a long time without answers to the question. And that's what the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, who wrote the first Maimorim, who said the first Maimorim, first discourses. So it's important to know that. Nevertheless, that's why I say, so as long as you keep in mind what he asked in the beginning, and we'll get back to it, hopefully with an answer, a resolve at the end, that's fine. But it's the meat and the potatoes, the body of the Maimer, that's really the inspiration. The question and answer it's a nicety. Okay, it's a vart on the parsha. it explains something in the parsha, it's fine. It's good for table conversation, for family, for friends. It's all true. But if you're looking to be inspired, to serve Hashem with more vigor and zest and enthusiasm and all that, it's not about questions and answers anymore. It's about the content of the Maimer. So we're now on page 140. We're beginning now, 3 lines from the bottom, the last word. V'ibud Amalek. We learned yesterday that there is a nation, and there's a time when the only solution is Ibudai Zehu Tikunai. Those are very important words to remember. It's the 3 last words on that line. Ibudai Zehu Tikunai, the 4 last words. Its destruction is its betterment, its tikkun, as we discussed yesterday. The Rebbe introduces now another concept. How do you accomplish ridding yourself from Amalek? It's through revealing what we call Oir Atzmi, essential light. And he explains. Let's see how he explains this concept.
Rabbi, I thought Or Atzmi means internal light.
No, that's Or Pnimi. Pnimi is internal. Sometimes they go together. Good point you're making. They go together. But let's see. The Hine Zayin Amemim, the 7 nations. Heim Zayin Midos Ros. They are the 7, they correspond to the 7 ugly, bad Midos, character traits. Sheheim Aklipos, these are the negative forces. Vahalumazeh, and the opposite, the Zayin Midos, the Kedusha of the 7 holy traits. The Kmoisho Ava, and he explains, just as love from the perspective of Kedusha, of holiness, Hu Harotzon, top of page 141, Hu Harotzon Belikus, it is to love, to desire, to will, Ratzon, for godliness. Why? I thought Ava means love. Look what the Rebbe says. The Ava, the next words, the Ava Shorshoy Ava. Avram, what's the root, the etymology of the word Ava? It's Ava. What does Ava mean? Shehu Ratzoin. It means will. Love is not the real definition of the word Ava. It's kind of a colloquial interpretation of the real meaning. Because the source of the word Ava, Yodi, is Ava. And Ava doesn't mean love. What does Ava mean? Will. And so then why do we say love? Ava means, what's the association between Ava, love, and Ratzon? He says further, look further. Vehu sheroitza belikus, it's that he desires and wants godliness, because godliness is life and goodness. And he loves it. He wants it. He wants to live. He wants to have good. So he loves it. So his love is generated by a ratzon, a strong desire and will. So now the question is, wait a minute. How does he know what he wants is life and good? Says the Rebbe, I'll tell you how. V'hainu shemizboinen belikus, he contemplates, he reflects on godliness, on God's greatness, v'nirgish etzloi, and he feels, regish, hatoiv delikus, the goodness within godliness. What does he mean, Avram? Yoni, Yonison, the toiv shebelikus, God, Hashem, is God. Whether we feel it's good or we don't feel it's good, he's God. And we know and we believe that what he does is the right thing. Here, what prompts this person is not knowing that God is God even when things are going sour for me. Because when things are going sour, I don't necessarily want that. I don't want it. So I don't have Ava Lelokus. I don't have love for God when when you punish your child, they have love for you. Only later, years later, they see the significance of the punishment for your betterment. But at the time, it's a punishment. At the time, it's tough. Here we're saying he has a love, an ava, a rotzen. He wants this. Why does he want it? Because he perceives it to be life and good. Says the Rebbe, this is because the particular reflection and meditation and contemplation that he did at this time is that he came to a recognition that this thing is look at the Rebbe's language, v'nigesh etzlei hatoiv de elokus, that this God is good. In other words, this is very important. He could come to a conclusion using another meditation that this God is God, but it's not good for me. I still understand that he's God, but then I would be awed by him because I'm scared, or I have reverence, or I have respect. That's not ava. That's yira yoni. Yira, fear, awe, reverence. Ava means you realize, hey, this is good stuff. This gives me more life. That's the connection, the Rebbe says, between love, ava, and triggered by ratzon, will, which is triggered by his bonus, a meditation, a reflection on the goodness within Elokus. So I elaborated here because the Rebbe says these words, and we can easily glance over them, and we have to stop and talk it out. Harehu, third line, Harehu roitze belikus. Because he feels, it's nirgash, Yodeson. It says nirgash. He has a reddish that this is toiv de elokus. Therefore, he wants this. Huroitze belikus. The Rebbe says the truth is, the kashem is boinu kidiboyi. When one reflects properly, then one will feel hatoiv delikus bemuchesh. Now here he adds a word. One will feel the goodness of godliness bemuchash. What does muchash mean? Intangibility. Or, like we say in America, and probably in Eretz Yisrael too, in the bank. You could feel it, you could touch it, you could smell it, you could see it. The five senses, bemuchash. Yes, Yodeson.
The word muchash is the same as mamash. Mamash means actually.
Good. Actually, correct. So the Rebbe says, just as this is true, that when a person meditates, now I use the word meditates, I don't like it, it's an English word, I mean reflects, thinks deeply. And I might want to say again, that if you don't do this, his bonus, and Yodeson can help you, guide you, because he's a big his bonus man, and I'm very proud of him, because he's really worked all his life on his bonus, and it's very important. So, you have to be misbainin. It doesn't come from just interpreting the words of shul and sitting in Shabbos and shul and davening, which is important. His bonus means reflection. You know what reflection means? That before you start davening, whether it be at home or in shul, you put your talus over your head, you close your eyes or you don't close your eyes, you block out everything and everyone, including people who want an aliyah. They shouldn't disturb you at that time because now you're in this bonus mode. Now, of course, you know, if you're a Gabbai Moshe, you have obligations. But the point is, you need to take time somehow where you're able to think about Hashem in detail. Not just, hey, God, you're a great guy. You're not going to get anything from there. You're not scoring no points. And you're not, that's not going to accomplish what we're talking about here. That's a nice thing, an important thing. His abundance means deep meditation and reflection. Why is God good? How can I say God's good? I had a flat tire on Kvish Echad and spent 3 hours in the sun. God, you're good with you. Good. Well, why'd you make me have a flat? Oh, you got to think about it. How did God create the world? What does he want with his creation? Why do I get an email yesterday from a boy, 90-year-old in Lakewood, saying he learns in Litvish Yeshiva, and he asks me why do most Litvaks hate Chabad? 2022, I receive a very long email from a Litvish boy. I just told you. Well, is that good or is that bad? And he needs an answer. He deserves an answer. And I told him, come for Shabbos to Borough Park. We'll have all the time in the world. We'll farbring and talk. And we'll work it out, hopefully. And he says, he studies Chabad, and he's done the research, and he sees how beautiful it is. Talking about from the Alter Rebbe on. And he disagrees with the Mashiachistin, okay. But the point is, his boldness doesn't come just from short, exchanges, a question and answer. Moshe, you missed my introduction to the shir, but I was saying that Hasidus Chabad is about the content. The body of the mimer is where it's at, not the questions and answers. Questions and answers, you go to other Svarim, holy Svarim, great Svarim, important Svarim. But this is a different system. This is about finding meaning to an issue. And for that, you need his boldness. So when the Rebbe says here, his boldness, he says it, and you're like, we read it, and we go by. Next line, next word. So you just got to know that when he talks about feeling God, bemuchash, as Yonis said, mamish, in actuality, it takes his boldness. So the Rebbe now says, there's also a love for foolishness. Right? Lahavdil, yin and yang, up and down, positive and negative. Masha Yeroitze, now the Rebbe has only the Frierdiker Rebbe can embellish and write so beautifully. Look what he says. What does it mean to have Ava to Lu'umaze, to Shtus? Well, it's pretty simple, I think, but let's see how he says it. Masha Yeroitze b'dvarim agashmiyim. It's the fact that a person wants material matter because of what appears to be good to him, to the mind's eye of the animal drive. Pretty fancy words, but in English, simple English, it means it turns on my brain that is oriented at this time for animalistic cravings. I now have justification to indulge. So it's not, you see this? It's not that art is gewaldic, it's a form of expression. But if you use art to satisfy your nefesh abamis, that is an unhealthy love. And if you use gashmias to satisfy intellectually our animal part, our indulgent part, our ugly part, it's coming from klipa. And we call this Ava de Lu'umazeh. Okay, so we're introducing this mimer two concepts. There's Ava, love for the goodness of godliness, and simultaneously there's an opponent for Ava, having a will, a love, and a will for something that's unhealthy, that appears to be unhealthy, which also comes from God. But from God's perspective, it's there for us to avoid, to challenge, to test. You know why you have that flat tire on Kvish Echad with 90 degrees outside? To see if you're going to lose your cool. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. So and that's why you passed the test. Boy, are you strong. What have you proven? That even such a challenge, you are stronger and you know how to overcome it. In other words, your real self is greater. But the point is, there is what we call Ava, love for La'umazeh, for something that opposes the goodness of Elokus. And what is that? The Rebbe gives a definition here. It is desiring the good within the material. So the question is always asked, I've been asked many times, and probably you have also, what is wrong to want, we've discussed it, I believe, in Shiurim. What is wrong to desire the delicious taste of a steak? Or a good Thursday night chunt, a Hamish chunt with kigel. What's so bad?
Kishke.
Kishke. And what's the answer? If you eat it because you need to survive and that helps you because you're starving after 3-4 hours not eating, you take a piece of kishke or kugel and you eat it with a bracha. You think about the bracha, you eat it like a mensch. Kol hakavod. Go ahead. On the contrary, it needs you. It needs you to refine it. But if you're only eating to satisfy your taiva, that's unhealthy. Let's continue. It's not that. Now the Rebbe says here another point. When we have a love for gashmias, for what appears to be good, it looks good, it's enticing. It's not that we want to separate ourselves, Moshe, from God. It's not that a person says, hey, I don't like you, God, and I don't want any part of you. No, I do like you, and I want to be part of you. But what this thing here looks good, tastes good, feels good, and I want to feel good. I want my body to feel good. That's why it says, it's not that this person that we're talking about, in this scenario, wants to be separate, nifrat malikus, elurak l'toivosai. What's the issue here? It's just for his goodness, ulahanosai, for the word hana'ah. It's for his pleasure. Of what? Shel nefesh habamish. He wants the pleasure, indulge in nefesh habamis. Let my nefesh habamis have more and more and just get pleasure. Sheboiche b'toiv gashmi, therefore he chooses the material good, v'roitze b'ma shetoiv loi, and it wants what it considers as good for it. V'lachei nikra, and therefore, what is this called, Avram? B'shem behema. You understand? Remember in Morristown, you're a behema. Why do you say you're a behema? It's not a nice thing. In other words, this is your behema. So I remember the Cheved, the Baal Tshuva especially, used to say, it's your behema. That's what he's saying here. That's why it's called behema. Ki behema, because an animal, calling yoneh, all its entire drive, is to pleasure its body. How can my body have more pleasure? And the Rebbe says, and from spirituality, and from and from spiritual soul matters, bilti yodas klau. This behemoth has no idea, no understanding, no perception of spirituality of nefesh. This is one type of ava that opposes ava of kedusha. Now the Rebbe goes to another step. So too we find a similar situation when it comes to human traits, character. Where they're all that one has and wants, character-wise, is bodily expression. And all he does his entire life is to emphasize this. Yes, Moshe.
Rabbi Dovlik, can I ask you a question at this time?
Sure.
Would this come up many times, I think, but can you help us to understand what's the difference between the term neshama and nefesh?
Okay, so in many times, like here, there's no difference, but other times there is. Basically, neshama refers to the nefesh elokis. it's a general classification. The nefesh can refer to the nefesh abamis. That's one difference but again, it all depends on the overall content of that particular mimer, or that particular page, or that particular paragraph. But that would be just to answer your question, that would be a general distinction that you can make, if barring anything else doesn't contradict it. You follow? Of what you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another general difference. It says in Kabbalah there are 5 levels to the neshama: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. The acronym of which is Naran Chai. Nun, Reish, Nun, Ches, Yud. First Nun is nefesh, Reish is ruach, second Nun is neshama, Ches is chaya, and the Yud is yechida. Right? Neshama and nefesh is the lowest manifestation in a person's soul. It's the action-oriented, behavior. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to feel. You have to just do behavior. Then comes ruach, which is emotions. It's not enough to do, or better, or also you don't act just by behaving. You act with emotions as well. Ruach, feelings. Then there is nefesh, which is nefesh ruach neshama, which in this scenario of the 5 that we're discussing, neshama represents moach, seichel. Not only do you behave, act, and not only do you feel, but you also understand. So Moshe, that's the answer. Another difference between neshama and nefesh. Neshama refers to the intellectual aspect of the person, the seichel, and the drive. In other words, what drives the seichel, and nefesh is the behavior aspect that drives the behavior. Okay, let's continue.
Rebbe,
yes,
Rebbe, just another question.
Yes,
okay. I understand the concept where you're talking about, because we've talked about this before, and
yeah.
The Rebbe talks about many times about the nefesh bahamis and with the steak or the cholent, whatever. But I understand a steak or even a cholent, it has nutrition. I mean, you need to eat. You need to have a meal every single day.
Right.
So you can be a glutton, or you can elevate it.
Right.
But something like an ice cream cone, or an Entenmann's donut, or something like that, how can something like that? You're not eating it for nutrition.
Okay, wait.
You're eating it only for.
Most times you're right. But what if you're starving? The story I told you about my father-in-law when he came from Australia after a 50-hour trip in the 70s, because he had to stop in Fiji and in Sydney and in Hawaii and in San Francisco and then New York. So it was a very long trip. And he came Chol Hamoed Sukkos. Comes into 770, 2-3 in the morning. In those days, they weren't dancing outside and everything was quiet. He sees one person in 770, Rabbi Naftali Astulim, may be well, who was the Russian Chabad rabbi in Los Angeles since the early 70s. And he says, maybe you have something to eat. I'm so hungry. Everything is closed, And he says, Reb Chaim, his name was Chaim. He says, I have a loaf of bread, but it's stale and old. He says, oh, please give that to me. If you don't mind sharing it. Of course. He gives it to him, and he takes it, and then he's about to go and wash, and he says, before I wash, do you have salt? I told you this. He says, salt? He says, what do you need salt for? I have to dip into salt. And Rabbi Astul, he was a bacher, he he couldn't believe it. Like, you haven't eaten in 50 hours, there's no one around, that's all I have, what, you want salt? And he didn't say this is what he was thinking, and he said, I don't have salt. So he gave him back the loaf of bread. And he didn't eat it. So from here on, if you want to know what Yiras Shamayim is, think about this story. And if you want to know if someone's really a holy person, think about the story. That's all you have to do. And you have your answer. This happened, this is a fact, and this is real, and it happened in the 1970s. So although it's 50 years later, but it didn't happen 500 years ago, 200 years ago. It happened here. This is Yiras Shamayim. Now, why do I say that? Yoini, what if it wasn't a loaf of bread? What if he had an entomins, which we don't eat because it's a shayla of Bishul Yisro, but Pas Yisro? Or a cake, or, something that you said, an ice cream, At that time, an ice cream is like a dry piece of bread. No difference. Because he wasn't eating it for the ice cream. Don't kid yourself. He probably didn't even know what an ice cream is. He was eating it because someone gave him something so that after 50 hours he could survive. And I want to share with you a personal story, and I'm not bragging, because I wish I would live this way now. But when I was a bacher in my heyday, when you're in yeshiva, you're in your heyday. Ask Yonason. This was part of our training in Chabad. It's called Iskafia, to subjugate and hold yourself back from taivas. I never ate potato chips. I never drank soda. I didn't eat ice cream. I didn't eat any fancy cakes. Not that I didn't have it. I had it all around me. But I held myself back. Because this was a taiva. I really like it. Okay? When I say I never did, it means from when I realized probably 18, 19, that this is not, that a yid, especially a chassid, should hold himself back from cravings. This was an active work that we trained ourselves in yeshiva. Some more, some less, and it was ongoing. It wasn't as though, in 3 days from now or in 3 months from now, I won't have the craving. Like I told you, speaking to a 94-year-old man, and he says, find me a wife. I said, you got to be kidding. You got to be kidding. No, he wants a wife. He wants to be with a woman. I'm not saying he's being intimate with the women, but he wants a companion, and I understand it. In other words, there are certain bodily needs that are cravings of the human being that are there every moment until you pass on after 120. So, eating ice cream, Yoni, when you're starving and you're not eating it because it's ice cream, but because it's something to put in your mouth, is not a taiva. But you're right. Every other time, it is a taiva. And going back to the steak, you say, or the chonk, if you have a choice of a piece of cooked chicken, let's break it down so we know, versus roasted chicken, grilled chicken, barbecue chicken, Chinese chicken. And then your wife makes you, in a soup, you put some chicken in. But it's bland, it's just cooked. We all know, what chicken are we choosing? Only a person like my father from Romania, who's thankful every day he has a bite in his mouth, surviving, eats cooked chicken every day of his life. I mean, when we were growing up, it was amazing. He just asked for cooked chicken. My grandmother, Sholem, was a good cook. He didn't care for the fried, the this and that. He just wanted simple chicken. He had stomach issues. The doctor told him, you eat simple food, you'll be fine. All his life, the man can eat 80 years cooked chicken. Yeah. Some will say that's OCD, right? What's my point? The nakuda is that, Yaini, the taiva begins here, in the mind. And the taiva, so if the mind's eye, if the perception is, hey, I'm starving and I want to just eat something. Oh, so I was going to tell you, finish that story. So I remember once in Morristown, and it was, I think, Hanukkah, and we went out to do Mivtzoyim, and we spent a lot of time giving out menorahs and everything. I came back, I was so hungry, and someone brought pizza, and I didn't eat in those days pizza. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to have a slice of pizza because that is my food. If I don't have this pizza, I won't have what to eat the rest of the night. And I hadn't eaten. So I'm not, making myself feel big with this, but I'm just telling you that is the Yiddish Hasidische Chabad attitude towards anything. And Rabbi Yoel Kahn, my mashpia, right, who I've told you so much about. Rabbi Yoel would sometimes ask for a piece of cake. Rabbi Marlo Shalom, who was my Rebbe in Yeshiva and then the Rav in Crown Heights, he would ask us to buy him a Danish in the morning. That's all he had. He had a coffee and a Danish from probably 5, 6 in the morning till 12, 12:30. Now I'm asking you, is that a taiva? No, it's not a taiva. So it all depends on the perspective. So definitely, I'm not saying when you're hungry, have some chunk. And all that. But you could always tell in how you eat it, if it's a taiva or if it's for kedusha. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow, Chevra. Have another shir. Sei gesund. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.